So hello and welcome to my session on online learning. I'm going to be joined later by Tony Pine, who's going to be talking about the use of the OneDrive during the middle of the session. This presentation is really a response to the COVID pandemic, which is causing us to change and adapt and rethink our approaches to everything really. But in this sense, the learning environment and quality first learning offer we give to our students also. Things have been changing rapidly over the past few months, and in particular the past few weeks, where we learned of the government's wish to send students back in year group bubbles. And the purpose of this session is to outline what changes we're making in school to meet the needs of our students, bearing in mind the amount of education that they've missed, and also their new learning environments in terms of the technology that we have on offer and how best to put it to use. And we all as educators need to move forward and enhance our practice to help our boys catch up and not miss out any further. As you can see, the layout of the session is as follows. Firstly, I'm going to very briefly go through a section of the guidance for full opening of schools, which was the government document which provides the base for what Tony and I will explain later. Then I'm going to give an introduction to the small changes we're going to make together, which include the use of the OneDrive and the procedures for if we do have a small or large scale lockdown. Tony will then demonstrate those changes, meaning that afterwards I can go through into a more detailed explanation of what's going to be expected from staff and students. So the DV document, Guidance for Full Opening of Schools, published 2nd of July. And this document is really the driver behind the protocols that we're putting into place. And the excerpts that I'm quickly going to go through are from section 5 of that document, titled Contingency Planning for Outbreaks. So I won't read through it all, but I'll try and give you the gist of it. Where a class group or small number of pupils need to self-isolate, or there is a local lockdown requiring students to remain at home, we expect schools to have the capacity to offer immediate remote education. And schools are expected to have a strong contingency plan in place for that remote education provision by the end of September, which ours is ready now, so you'll hear more about that later. This plan will be particularly important to support a scenario in which the logistical challenges of remote provision are greatest, for example when large numbers of pupils, or students should I say, are required to remain at home. It goes on to say that schools are expected to, in developing these contingency plans, use a curriculum sequence that is linked to the school's curriculum. So following on, if it's that immediate remote learning that we need to do, following on from where they were up to in school, it needs to be of a high standard, high quality. We need to make sure that staff are trained in the use of what we're asking them to do, which is what we're going to do today. And we need to also work with families to help deliver that. So I'm also going to talk very briefly later on about how we're going to involve parents in this. So when teaching pupils remotely, we expect schools to have assignments and work that's meaningful and ambitious, and work for each day in a number of subjects that's included in the plan and teach well sequenced curriculum, which is something I know curriculum leads have looked at earlier in the year. Frequent clear explanations of new content, and set clear expectations on how regularly teachers will check work. Again, all of that is covered in the plan. We expect schools to consider these expectations, and we expect schools to avoid an over-reliance on long-term projects or research activities. So the plans we're going to put in place are going to allow us to do all of that efficiently and effectively. So in putting those principles into practice, we're going to make more use of our OneDrive system. From a date which will be soon and which you will be informed of, we're not sure of the exact date yet, we will not be using the T drive to store or save lessons and resources into. We will be using the OneDrive instead. Now, we've had this OneDrive system, I think, from about 2016 or 17, and it's just not been widely used, but that's going to change. Further information on the practicalities of this will follow in due course, but what will be happening is all documents on the T drive will be transferred over to the OneDrive. So files and folders will still appear in the same order as they did on the T drive. You'll be notified when this transfer has taken place, and from that point onward, all lessons and resources are to be saved to the OneDrive. And Tony will kindly show you how to do this shortly. So besides the fact that we've bought into an expensive system that isn't really being used at the minute, the OneDrive is completely accessible to staff outside of school. So if we are going to go into a lockdown, or a member of staff was absent, then they would have access to all of the lessons resources that would be needed, which I think is something incredibly important in the situation we're facing, and more on that later. One main change to our practice regarding OneDrive is that as of September, either on Friday afternoon or Monday morning at the latest, you will add your lessons for that week into your class areas on OneDrive. Now, we're happy for this to be done in larger chunks, so say a half term at a time, if that's easy for people, but it's really quick to do this, as Tony will show you. But if you are going to do it in the larger chunks, then we've just got to make sure that it matches the curriculum. So, you know, if you get a few lessons behind or ahead, what's on the system should match what they're doing. Now, just important to say, these lessons aren't, you know, the recorded, narrated lessons, just the exact same PowerPoint and resources that you would use in a lesson, and it's literally the case of just dragging them and dropping them into a folder. It's that quick and easy. Now, the reason for doing this is that it will enable students who are absent, excluded, or on detention, or just wanting to get back up to speed, check, revise something, they'll be able to complete the lesson or catch up on something they've missed. And this also allows us the option to set our homework in this manner and use it as a tool for COVID catch-up. The main driver behind utilising the OneDrive more is that it provides us with the easiest way to meet the Department for Education's guidance during a lockdown, whether that be a whole school or partial lockdown. I'll go through this in detail following Tony's demonstrations, which are coming in a moment, which will hopefully make things easy to follow. So if a lockdown took place, the main teaching resource would be pre-recorded or narrated PowerPoint lessons. We will not be asking you to teach live lessons, although we actually do have the capability to do that through Microsoft Teams. But I must stress that when we become part of the Bishop Buick MAT, this may change. It may not, but it may. And I'm sure if it does change, then the appropriate training or guidance would be given. But we're going forward with this plan so that from day one in September, if anything were to happen, we all know exactly what we're going to do. So nevertheless, the plan we have is effective, can be implemented at short notice. So I'm going to hand you over to Tony now to go over the following things: general info on OneDrive, how to save a lesson to OneDrive, how to upload lessons for the week, homework uploads, how to record a PowerPoint video and upload it yourself, how to find work students have uploaded and also how to mark work online.
Firstly, to start using OneDrive or Teams, you are looking for the following icons that are surrounded by the red circles. The view that you're looking at the moment is a view from if you were to log on to Teams or OneDrive using Office 360 online. If you are using your laptop and you've got these apps pre-installed on your laptop, you're simply looking for the icons that will be on your desktop screen on your laptop. Couple of options within OneDrive. You can either upload by using the option circled above previous content from your T drive and drag it across, or you can select new and then new folder. As you click on new folder, it will ask you for your folder name, put one in and then click on create. Here is your folder created. With this, you will be able to drag and drop from your usual T drive folder any files that you've pre-made into your OneDrive folder, which means you can upload multiple files at one time. If we then go back to the main screen and look at Teams, we will move on to see how we can use Teams to do lessons and to upload lessons and to look at things like homework. So click on Teams. When you've clicked on Teams, what you will see is all of your classes that you will have present on your timetable pre-built within Teams. The classes will also have students within those that are pulled across every evening from Sims using a piece of software called Ruler. This makes it very efficient for teaching staff, meaning that you don't need to add and delete students yourself. There's other things you can do within Manage Teams to mute students or to put certain permissions on students, but for the purpose of adding groups and making sure that your class is there, that is out of your hands. You don't need to worry about it. Once within your team, the first thing that will appear will be a chronological running commentary of any posts that have been shared or uploaded by members of your team. So for example, here you can see where I've set an assignment. I've then commented on somebody's post, which is Jay within my group. I've then marked that assignment and sent it back to him. The idea here is you can see who's handed it in, when they've handed it in, then you can click on it and monitor that work and mark that work. That's something that we are going to look at in a moment. Please also notice that along the top of that ribbon, next to where you see posts, there are files, class notebooks, assignments and grades. There's also a plus sign there, which we'll talk about in a moment. Moving on to files, this area really has become the new S drive, the area where you can share all of the materials with your class that you would ordinarily share through the S drive. So we're talking about things like assessment materials. You can also share all of the course information such as specifications. To be honest, you can actually upload and drag across the whole of what you've got in an S drive for a particular group. So it means that you don't need to be clicking on new constantly to add one piece of material. You can, again, the same as with the OneDrive, move across all of that class's content ready for them to use within that school year, if obviously you've already got that pre-made. As you want them to share new documents and you're creating something new, obviously that's where you would click on the new option and simply select that from the folder that you've saved that work in. Class Notebook does a huge amount of different things for a class teacher. So with Class Notebook, teachers can distribute files to students in just a few clicks or to an entire class. They can also do it to small groups or to individual students. And because teachers always have access to student notebooks, they can review student work at any time. Class Notebook is a training session in itself. But if you're using it generally within Teams, like I have here, you can place a piece of work in there that the class can collaborate on. If you want to then look at an individual piece of student notebook, that is a different training session. Assignments is hugely credible to a class teacher, especially in a lockdown situation. In terms of assignments, you could create, by clicking on the create button, either a question as part of a piece of homework that you want students to answer. That would then be sent to all students within your group, and they would have the opportunity to respond to it and then for you to mark it. Or again, you could set a question or a topic or another type of assignment as part of a lesson that you want to see students responding to. In order to do this, once you have clicked on the create button on the previous page, the following page would be displayed. In this case here, I have set an essay question. I've then pasted the question into the instructions section. Within points, I've put how many marks I expect as a total to get back from that question, and I've got the option to save it at the top, circled in red, if I want to go back and check it before I assign it, or I can assign the question to the group. At the bottom of that page, it also gives you the options to put on a date and time stamp of when you want that work to come back in from students. Once a student has passed the deadline of an assignment, you can click on the grades section within Teams, and you can give each student within your team a mark. As you can see, for the first question that I set, there was 2 students I got work back from. One got a 7, one got a 6. You just click on those boxes to populate them. For the second assignment that I have just set, that can be populated at another time. The idea with the grade sheet, if you look to the right hand side of the screen, you will see that you've got an export to Excel option there as well. As the year goes on and more assignments have been set, you end up with, again, a running commentary in terms of grades of what students have managed to achieve for you throughout the year. As you export that to an Excel file, that becomes the back of your planner in terms of what grades students got for what assignments. Very, very handy for things like parents' evenings and also for writing reports. So you're probably thinking now, that's great, I know how to use those things in posts, files, class notebooks, assignments and grades across the top of the ribbon. But what happens when I've set an assignment and I want to go back to that assignment to see what my students have done? Well, if we go back to the posts section of Teams, you will see that the essay question that I have set will be displayed for all of the students within that group to see. And that again is in chronological order at the bottom of that page. Once a student has seen the assignment that you have set for them within Teams, they can click on it, open it up, access it. They can comment on it via their own Office 360 account, which they can access anywhere on the web or again in school on the desktops, and then they can save it. Once it is saved, it will go back into your team, and that's when, as a class teacher, you would be able to mark the work. Marking a student's piece of work is very simple within Teams. In order to access the document at first, you go back to the previous page we've just been on, click on the student's piece of work, and then their work is displayed to you like shown here. Their work is in black. Your work will be, depending on what colour you select, in the respond and comment section shown at the top of this page. Once you have clicked on respond and new comment, you can then click anywhere on the page in order to leave a piece of marking. When you are finished, you click done at the top right hand corner of the page, and the work is automatically saved back to the student's response, so they can access your comments immediately from what you have left on the page. This is excellent because it means if a student then sends you a piece of work back for the second time, their original response, your marking, and then whatever they've done again is all displayed on the page, so you end up with different versions of the same piece of work all in one document, which keeps it nice and simple to see where a student has progressed throughout that piece of work. I've then responded back to Jay here within posts and told him that he can view the mark scheme for the question, and it's automatically uploaded my response to the bottom of that post to the student so that he can see where it is that he originally went wrong. Lastly, we wanted to highlight how to record a lesson, again, in case we do go into a lockdown situation, so that you can upload those lessons to your OneDrive as shown previously in this video, or as part of your team. In order to record a PowerPoint, click on Slideshow and record Slideshow, and then select either from the beginning or from recording from current slide. Once you have done that, as you start speaking, the slide is automatically recorded. As you press through each slide is recorded in turn, and then when you get to the end, you will come to the final page that will say resume recording. If you click on resume recording, it will continue to record that page, or if you press escape, that would be the end of your recording. That recorded lesson can then be saved as normal and dragged and dropped into OneDrive or into the team that you want that lesson to be a part of.
So thanks to Tony for those demos, and I know there will be a refresher in or on one of the September training days if staff need a bit of a reminder after the summer. So here's the plan in a bit more detail. So if a lockdown took place, we need to be ready to go immediately. I'll now talk you through the procedures under the headings staff, lesson guidance, students and parents. So firstly, staff are to ensure they have access to their department's lessons on the OneDrive, which they should do. The plan outlined below is in case of a full school lockdown. So if year group bubbles or class bubbles were forced to be isolated to do remote learning, then the following information would only be relevant to that particular year group or class, and the deadlines which are going to be given would remain the same. So the initial plan is for whole school lockdown, but just to be clear, if for example it was only year 7 and year 8, they would just follow that part of the guidance. So 2 lessons for 7 and 2 lessons for year 8. So weekly, each department will send the following number of recorded PowerPoint lesson videos that will last 30 minutes each. So 2 for 7, 2 for 8, 2 for 9, your key stage 3, 3 for 10, 3 for 11, your key stage 4, and 4 for 12 and 4 for 13. So that's 20 lessons a department lasting 30 minutes each. Curriculum leads are to organise within the departments who creates the lesson videos, and curriculum leads will also be responsible for quality assuring those lessons before they're uploaded onto the system. And staff are responsible for ensuring the year group lessons are uploaded to their individual classes on the OneDrive prior to the deadline. So when we've been doing these downloadable lessons for year 7, 8 and 9 towards the back end of the holidays, the back end of their summer term, they've been sent to Archie Cameron, who's then put them on YouTube. Now that's not going to be the case if we were to enter lockdown, because students would be able to access the things in their class folders on their OneDrive. So it's up to the individual members of staff to make sure that the lessons that they teach or are going to be teaching their classes are going to be put on the system. So for example, if it was RE and I asked Ruth to come up with our year 7s and Megan year 8s and so on, if Megan taught year 7, Megan would have to make sure that she put Ruth's lesson into her individual classes and so on. The first due date for lessons will be 1 PM on the second working day of lockdown. So for example, if lockdown was announced on the Friday evening or over the weekend, then the lessons should be created and submitted by Tuesday at 1 p.m. so they can go live for the students the following morning. Now, we understand this is a quick turnaround and it's only going to be the case for that first set of lessons, but you know, the alternative to that is we create an ongoing bank of these video lessons throughout the course of the year, which I don't think is a productive use of our time, especially when there's going to be a lot of changes in September anyway. So I know it's a quick turnaround, but I think it's the best of all the options we had. So it'll probably be a mad day and a half potentially, but once it's done, then you'll have a week to meet the next set of deadlines. So the following deadlines will be exactly a week from the same date and time of the first deadline. So following the example I've given on the screen, the first deadline would be Tuesday 1 p.m. at the second working day of lockdown. So the following deadline would be a week later exactly. It's very important to note the lessons are to follow on from the scheme of work, and lessons are to last roughly 30 minutes, and there will be quality assurance mentioned later on, and also the timetables in terms of how the boys will be working through those. Now, it's important to note that every second lesson, staff are to set a task that students will complete and upload to the OneDrive. The purpose of this is it will enable us to see how many students are actively engaging. You know, one of the good things, I suppose, about SAM Learning was that we could see exactly who was logging on at particular times and who was doing the work, and we could track that and get in touch if boys weren't working. So to try and sort of mimic that, I suppose, the best way to do it is by setting them work, and we'll be able to see who's actively engaging. This is to be marked, the work that's sent in, according to school policy, so it's to be marked 1 in 3, so not every piece of work that they send in we expect to be marked. And Tony has gone through how you mark. It's quite straightforward, and you know, copy and pasting can be used in that sense. So Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, the instructions for these tasks should be given in the appropriate lesson recording, and it's going to be slightly different to Key Stage 5, which you'll see when I talk through their timetable soon. Their instructions to be given for guided independent study. So it's up to staff whether this is submitted via OneDrive or via email, because I know there's been a lot of positive feedback from the boys recently about how staff have kept in touch with them throughout the lockdown through emails, and they feel supported in that way, and that it's been an effective thing to do. Now, once the boys have sent the work in, staff are to complete a register of students who have completed work and uploaded it. Tony's going to say more about that in the September training days when the classes have linked up to your OneDrive, but it's dead straightforward to do, and it's just a case of just ticking that they've done it. And then in September we'll give you more guidance as to what to do with those registers, so to liaise with house teams and how to do that, so we can chase up any boys who aren't engaging, which is what the house teams have been doing effectively throughout this lockdown, especially in terms of boys who should have been in school for the year 10s and 12s, for example. Now, looking at lesson guidance and quality assurance. Each lesson should include what I'm going to talk about, and the guidance I've used for what we should include comes from the M&E template 2, so it's, you know, should be things that we're familiar with. Curriculum leads are responsible, as I said earlier, for the quality of lessons in their department. The lessons should follow the curriculum. I really want to stress, you know, if we're following the curriculum, we should be using what we already have in terms of PowerPoints. So we're not asking you to sit for hours and redo things. you're just literally talking over and giving instructions on the lesson that you would have been teaching had they been in front of you. And bear in mind that the year group's lesson covers all ability ranges, and we've got mixed ability for roughly the first half term in year 7 until they get the CATS results back. So I think the best phrase to use is make it accessible but challenging. So this is what we expect to be in all of those lessons that are going online during a lockdown protocol, and again it's the responsibility of curriculum leads to ensure that all of these points are being covered in those lessons, because if they're not, chances are I may be asked to redo it. So firstly, remind to have pen and pencil, paper at the ready so they've got something to work on. Secondly, a form of retrieval practice. Thirdly, give you information clearly with learning checks and build in time for students to answer. Exam style question or extended writing, if appropriate for Key Stage 5. It might be the case that in RE we just do essays where they need to have studied a chunk of work, so it's quite hard to do questions every lesson, but I could still set them some form of extended writing. And within that, give them the guidance, remind them what they need to do to get top marks, etc. Give them time to answer it, and afterwards go through that model answer and talk through them so they can do their own self-assessment from home. And what I said earlier, every second lesson, please give a clear instruction for what staff would like the students to upload and when by. And any further additions to lessons, like embedding videos and things like that, are completely fine as long as the criteria on this page has been met. And from a practical perspective, I know this from conversations I've had in my own department, where we're asking you to build in time for the students to answer. I think one of the easiest ways would just be, when you're reading, once you've given them the instruction on the narrated PowerPoint, just ask them to pause the video and do the task for however long you'd like them to do them, and then ask them to press play. It just saves your time having to, the alternative is that you might sit still for 5 minutes in silence while the video's playing, and that'll save a bit of time for yourself. So students are to follow the timetables that I'm going to talk through now, and they will access the videos through the OneDrive themselves. So the first timetable we can see here is for Key Stage 3, and basically the boys study 15 subjects, and we've split each day up into 3, so 3 hours worth of lessons a day. So each subject will do 2 30-minute lessons for that week. Now, no Mandarin on Friday afternoon is only done by a handful of classes, and for the boys who don't do Mandarin, we're going to encourage them to do some form of physical activity to help them with their physical and mental well-being. Slightly different for Key Stage 4. So the timetable I've got here is for year 10 11 in Pathway 1. Again, all subjects are spread out, so they do 2 subjects a day, 3 hours worth of lessons a day, because each subject does 3 30-minute lessons. So on the Monday they do an hour and a half, 3 30-minute lessons of English literature, and then the same for RE. Friday afternoon they would choose their one options subject to do. Now Pathway 2 is exactly the same as Pathway 1, except for one change. The Friday morning MFL that Pathway 1 would do is being replaced by their other options subject. Now, sixth form looks completely different from Key Stage 3 and 4. And you'll notice, it is different because most of the boys only do 3 subjects. So as the lessons don't go live until the third day, we expect students to complete their own independent study for those first 2 days. So as you can see next to the first day of lockdown and the second day of lockdown. And I've already spoken to Pollyanna. Depending on the time of year, it might be the case that she could fire something out really quickly for them to do with UCAS or university applications, but they should really be taking care of themselves. And then the following 3 days they complete their taught lessons, and in these taught lessons staff will give instructions for guided independent study, which is what they'll cover for the following 2 days after those 3 lessons, so starting back at the start of the second week. Now this fits in entirely with the policy that's already there on the school website, that sixth formers for each subject should be doing independent study for each subject 3 to 5 hours a week, so that fits in perfectly. And these timetables are going to be made explicit to both students and parents through our usual mediums, emails, letters, text, school website. So parents, just to say something briefly on how we're going to involve the parents. Just as I said earlier, the usual methods about email, text, letters, website. We're also going to sometime in September create a video of how to support your son's continuation of learning. So it's going to be sort of a watered down version of what you've seen today, which will enable them to help the students. So in order to smooth the transition into our lockdown curriculum, if needed, pardon me, we need to use the system as much as possible to become familiar with it. One of the simplest ways of doing this is through using the OneDrive homework, and curriculum leads will be encouraged to get departments to use the OneDrive for homework. All kinds of homeworks can be set, as Tony will have explained earlier. It's just a case of uploading the documents to the class, and they can even be posted with instructions and dates. And these to be done following the school's homework policy, of course. And another advantage of setting homework is that it can be used to help support work missed in the lockdown. But it's just worth noting that government guidance is that homework and online resources should not replace face-to-face teaching, but be used alongside it to enhance it. So it's not the case that because we're going to be using all of these online resources and things, that you think, oh well, I'm struggling to complete X, Y and Z lessons, or this part of the scheme of work, so I won't teach them that face to face, I'll just put that online for them. We can't do that. It's not to replace face to face teaching. The government guidance has made that clear. So it's to enhance the time that we have with the boys face to face. And just before we head into the final summary, because we're nearly finished, I just want to remind staff about safeguarding yourselves in terms of working online with the students. You must never ever communicate with students' parents via social media. Please use the school approved mediums. So to summarise, we are moving away from the T drive to the OneDrive, so the exact dates are to be confirmed, and we'll definitely keep you informed with that. And it won't be a sudden thing. We'll have a little bit of a transition period to make sure the staff are completely comfortable. Lessons from your teaching week are to be put onto the OneDrive, and this will be checked by curriculum leads. 30 minutes recorded videos in lockdown, 2 lessons a week from each subject for Key Stage 3, 3 for Key Stage 4 and 4 for Key Stage 5, so that works out to 20 a department if you teach year 7 to 13. Curriculum leads to quality assure those lockdown lessons against the criteria that's been given, and it's more or less the exact same criteria that the curriculum leads were given earlier by myself when doing the year 7 to 9 lessons for the end of summer term. staff are to mark students' work in lockdown. Not every second lesson I'll put there, I should have changed that really. Students are to submit work every second lesson, staff are to mark it 1 in 3, so every third bit of work that's submitted. And they are to record who is submitting work on the register. That's very, very important, so we chase up boys who aren't actively engaging. And OneDrive to be used for homework from September. So I know that was a lot to take in there. Tomorrow on Friday I'm going to hopefully email out the Word document version of the lockdown procedures, so if you need to make yourself familiar with that again, but we'll be touching on this in September. Any issues or anything like that, please just drop me an email. Thank you very much. Take care.